Gather round, everyone, and prepare to be swept away by the thrilling exploits of Gino Cuddy, Clive Davis, and Nick Sheehan as they embark on a daring journey across the silent screen. They'll ride through the annals of film history, recounting the captivating saga of the silver screen's very first Western superstar. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Hart to Hart, the William S. Hart podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Hart to Hart, the William S. Hart podcast. I am, of course, your host, Gino Cuddy, and I'm here with my two co-hosts, Clive Davis and Nick Sheehan. We are continuing our pilgrimage through the filmography of William S. Hart, and the two films that we are going to be discussing today, or at least trying to discuss today, because we'll get into it in a little bit, but these two films are kind of difficult to discuss, not because of, maybe one, arguably because of subject matter, especially towards the end of the film, but because of the fact that these films have been, one of them is a 40-minute reconstruction of one of them with varying picture quality and with foreign intertitles, and the character names differ from the original English version in the Argentinian version of this cobbled together reconstruction that we watched. And then the second one is going to be, we're going to try to talk about a feature-length film that we haven't seen the feature-length version of and have only seen a cut-down one-reeler of, with, again, different character names. So if we get anything wrong here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, please forgive us, because we're trying our best here. I mean, it's not like we have, keys to the mint as far as, film libraries and, film archives around the world. We're using what we could find on the internet. We've scoured the vast cosmos of the internet to be able to review these things. And, my system here is that if there's any film footage of it, we should at least take a gander at it and try to discuss it as best as we can. And, well, anyway, let's actually get to the films that we're going to be reviewing tonight. We're going to be reviewing The Aryan, which was released on April 9th, 1916. And we're also going to be discussing The Captive God, which was released on July 23rd, 1916. So let's get into the first film, which is The Aryan, which, as I stated before, was released on April 9th, 1916. It was produced by the Triangle Film Corporation under the supervision of Thomas H. Ince, and it was distributed by Triangle as well. It was in production between November 1st to December 1st, 1915, and the production cost was $13,531.67, which in 2025 dollars would be $435,157.07. The version that we watched was billed under the title of The Taming of the Beast. This film was directed by William S. Hart with a story and screenplay by C. Gardner Sullivan, and was photographed by Joe August. The cast consists of Steve Denton, played by William S. Hart, Mrs. Denton, played by Gertrude Clare, Ivory Wells, played by Charles K. French, Trixie the Firefly, played by Louise Blaum, Chip Emmett, played by Herschel Mayall, Mexican Pete, played by Ernest Swallow, and Mary Jane Garth, played by Bessie Love. And the plot consists of gold prospector
Before you carry on there, two things. One, may I claim the pseudonym Mexican Pete for this show? And also, according to the IMDb, there are 3 directors on this film.
Oh, really? Well, they're probably uncredited, right?
No, well, it doesn't say that. I mean, they are uncredited. They weren't on the print we saw, but that, like we said, is a compromised print. But according to the IMDb, there's also Reginald Barker and Clifford Smith.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I believe Reginald Barker, I believe he directed the first film we reviewed, which was The Bargain, I think. It's been so long, since we even discussed The Bargain or did anything with The Bargain. So which was all
Okay,
the way
well,
back in our
look.
first episode, 1914, I think.
Yes, you're quite correct. Yes.
Yeah. So this is where it gets confusing because the version that we watched of the Aryan was an Argentinian print that was restored by the Museo del Cine, and it's a basically a hodgepodge. And you know the cool thing about this is this was pretty much reconstructed around the same time that, according to the restoration credits at the beginning, was pretty much this restoration was produced pretty much around the same time that they were producing the restoration of Fritz Lang's Metropolis with the Argentinian
Right.
print from that. And unfortunately, we had to deal with pretty much the same quality of print in dealing with the Aryan. There's only a couple spots where it's actually watchable.
Yeah. There's a very interesting
And
article online. I wish I could find it now because otherwise it's difficult to cite it, but I'm sure you're aware of it. Gino, there's a very lengthy article about when they discovered that print of Metropolis in Argentina and
yes.
ha
Everybody thought it was
just
bullshit, and yeah, everybody thought
yeah,
it was complete bullshit until somebody was like, "No, look at these
yes.
are." Have you ever seen this scene of Fritz Rasp reading the newspaper before?
Yeah, and there's a
No.
myriad, and it's one of only uh, several different cuts. Metropolis, it's interesting when you go looking, because I think people assume, oh yes, okay, Metropolis, by this point, the releases that we have, the HD, they are the kind of definitive Metropolises for all time. But no, it's still quite a quagmire of weird alternative versions and stuff, isn't it, Metropolis?
It's like
Oh yes,
the Epic of
yeah.
Gilgamesh, where like they're gonna still be like chapters dropping,
Yeah, maybe, maybe.
100 years from now, they'll find, oh my goodness, here's another chunk that was lost to the
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
time.
I mean, even if you watch the complete Metropolis, what they build as the complete Metropolis, there are still parts where they have to describe the action that's going on with text cards instead of actually showing you the footage because the footage was just in that bad a shape. So like I just like a brief explanation here. Basically, what they did, and the same thing I think applies to the Aryan as well, is they printed these films without cleaning them, without any sort of restoration work, and just printed them over to 16 millimeter, downgraded them to 16 millimeter. And so all of those artifacts like are still present in the 16 millimeter, and the only way that those can be removed is digitally. And even so, it's still like makes for difficult watching. I mean, at least with the complete Metropolis, they did a really good job of cleaning that up. With the Aryan, I mean, we weren't exactly watching a pristine HD rip of this. We were watching like basically something that I downloaded somewhere.
It's
But
funny
yeah,
from my point of view, every time you say the title, it always sounds to me as if it should be followed by The Aryans, Aryan 3, and Aryan Resurrection, because that's how we would pronounce them. Yeah. And along that tangent, I was just looking along this Reginald Barker's filmography. The same year as The Bargain, he actually did make this other film called A Relic of Old Japan, starring Sesue Hayakawa, about some
hmm.
old samurai who sends his son to the United States to finish his education.
What?
Yeah,
Okay, we need to see that uh,
yeah,
live for
It even
sure.
exists.
If it
yes,
exists,
if
yeah,
it even
fair enough, of
exists.
course. Yes, yes.
Luckily, we do have the whole Aryan series, so that's fine.
Um,
Keep making them.
um, yeah,
So what makes
yeah,
this
but you know what?
confusing
It's
is
still watchable enough. I'll have to say, I didn't
yeah,
struggle. I mean, guys, I've spent so much of my life looking at things like we're looking at prints that look like they've been, sieved through pea soup and stuff that like I didn't find this
yeah.
particularly big slog in terms of watchability. I mean, it's definitely was nothing, not a patch on Hell's Hinges in terms of how beautifully restored that
No,
has, but it was fine.
it's
You know,
it's Andy Milligan level.
yes,
Yeah, before
yes,
those were restored.
grimy,
So yeah.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so what's going to make this a confusing discussion is there are some names from the original American version of this film that have been retained. Like William S. Hart's character's name has been retained. Ivory Wells' character name has been retained. Mary Jane Garth has also been retained. But for some reason, they renamed Louise Glaum's character from Trixie the Firefly to Aurora for reasons. And
Please tell
they're
me
supposed to,
Mexican Pete is still Mexican Pete.
well, I don't think so because, at least he's not by name in here.
Oh no.
He's not, I don't see a title card referring to a character who is named Mexican Pete, nor do I see a title card in reference to a character named Chip Emmett, but I'm assuming that that's the Louise Glaum's character's lover in the beginning part of this film. I'm
Yes.
assuming.
Yeah, the
So
the
this is going to
casino
make
owner.
for an interesting discussion as far as trying to even lay the groundwork for the plot.
Mm.
So let me try to get through this plot synopsis. And ladies and gentlemen, you have to bear with me because I've only operated on like 2 hours of sleep, and I'm luckily able to carry on a conversation as well as I am because I had a caffeine co-pilot today. So
Maybe
here's the plot.
maybe the surrogate Mexican. I'm trying to think. It's difficult because there's nothing much south of Argentina, right? Until you hit
Yeah.
like Antarctica. So maybe he's Antarctic Pete or something in the Argentinian version.
Well, at least it's not Polecat Pete from the Border Menace. Egads, if we had to deal with him.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking.
I don't know if either one of you have seen The Border Menace, by the way, directed by Jack Nelson. Horrible. I mean, I love the shitty bottom of the barrel B Westerns because that's what I'm into. But, the thing is even I got to admit that that's a horrible film made poorly. And the worst actor in that is the egregiously horrible Jimmy Aubrey as Polecat P. So luckily we don't have to deal with him. I watched that film, by the way, with a friend of mine, Zane Clark. Hey, Zane. And he actually calls the character Hud Puller Pete.
Nice. I'm going to say Penguin Pete makes the most sense if he's from Antarctica. So
Yeah.
we might have to go with Penguin Pete, Clive.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
anyway,
let's
let's get this plot out of the way with, tell us what happens in the Aryan.
All right. Gold prospector Steve Denton arrives in Arizona hoping to strike it rich. Upon arriving, Crooked Saloon owner Ivory Wells enlists local floozy Trixie, aka Aurora in this print, to seduce Denton and rob him of his wealth. Trixie and her lover cheat Steve when Steve and Trixie's lover engage in a barroom brawl. Denton takes a liking to Trixie, and she lures him to a roulette table where he loses all his money. He awakens to find himself swindled and reads that his mother is dead. Denton finds Trixie, kidnaps her, and 2 years later, having nothing but hate in his heart, Denton leads a criminal gang of Mexicans and has Trixie enslaved. A caravan of thirsty travelers is told to leave by Denton and gang, and one of those travelers is Mary Garth, who heads to see Denton, and Denton provides her with some water, proving he does have a heart after all. Mary stands tall and doesn't buy into Denton's grisly facade. And the power of love, as does tend to happen in all of William S. Hart's films, leads Denton to turn on his gang of Mexicans and help the settlers reach
gang
their
of penguins.
destination.
They're not penguins, Clive.
Oh,
They're definitely coded as bandidos, I think.
Penguins in sombreros. Now that's a film.
Anyway, yes. Go on there, Gino. Finish up your synopsis.
I just did.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I don't just interject at random, Nick. I know what I'm doing here.
Thank you for being considerate there, Clive. So this is
sorry, in that version as well, it's slightly different. The William S. Hart character is his head is turned by the power of fresh fish, as opposed to love in the penguin version of the film. But, yes, other than that, go ahead.
So no, actually, okay. So this is interesting for a few different reasons, and we talked about this already. In that we're not actually necessarily seeing the film entirely as intended, because we're watching a print that was exported to another country, and the intertitles were translated, and apparently, possibly, some adjustments or changes were made for that local audience, which don't fully reflect maybe the original film. So bear with us as we try to kind of parse this, as Gino already said. one of the things that seems to be changed, if what I'm reading is correct, is that some of the more heavy-handed racial stuff, right, particularly from the ending, is supposedly toned down in this version. We don't actually get. So basically, okay, to unpack it all, like Gina's already told us the story. So Hart gets ripped off. He becomes a boiling rage monster, basically. Somewhat understandably, I think the setup is actually very good. I think it's like I do like a good revenge western. I like a western where somebody gets really, really screwed basically, and then becomes like a man
You
fueled by hate.
you being
Uh,
a member of that incel group online helps as well. You
no,
relate,
no,
right?
Clive, that's not true. But in this case,
It is
you
true.
know, it reminds what the hell? Anyway, things like the Return of Ringo, for example. There's lots of these. I think there's a spaghetti western I love with George Hilton, where his baby is starved to death of milk, and he goes back to the house where they wouldn't give him the milk, and he drowns the patriarch of the family in a bucket of milk in front of his children. I mean, I for some reason I really enjoy a revenge western, right? So I think the setup is amazing. I think the whole idea of him getting like he gets his money taken, and then the sleazy way in which like he gets this telegram that it says your mom is dying. You need to come, from a pastor. You need to be with her right now, and that is relayed to him as being like your mom's fine. She's doing good. So he doesn't go see his mom. He wakes up the next morning, as Gino said. He's had his money stolen and realized his only chance to see his dying mother has been taken from him, and he's understandably very angry. So maybe less understandably, he kidnaps the woman who's responsible, takes her away, and enslaves her in this kind of shack in the desert somewhere, and starts running a gang of bandidos. But again, all the stuff I'm fine with, in a way. Maybe
It's
not the
great.
kidnap.
This is I love this. It's the title card. It's the town where hatred reigned, and it's called
Yes,
The Spider's Brood.
yes, yeah. That
Yes.
it's very good. It's very intense,
Isn't that
right?
what your group online is called? Is it
That's what it's
a
called. Yes, yes,
homage to this film?
yes.
Homage.
So So where I think this version apparently differs maybe from the original version, if this is even true, right? Because when you read about this film online, there's strong opinions, right? And the title obviously is going to be it's
Yeah.
going to be an issue for people who are concerned around issues of white supremacy, concerned about issues of racism and so on, right? So yeah, you read about it and people are like, "Wow, this is like super racist and super misogynistic and so on and so forth." And I don't feel the print that I watched necessarily. I mean, yes, there's stuff in there like yes, as I said, kidnapping this woman and
Well, it
enslaving.
deals with those issues, but isn't necessarily those things itself, right?
Yes, yes, that's a piece for sure. And the film is not wholly sympathetic, obviously, to William S. Hart's character. He himself apparently was very uncomfortable with the character. If you read the Wikipedia entry on the film, right, he said it was like the most kind of loathsome character he ever played. So he's yeah. Um, so there's all that. So then yes, there's this moment where, and she's very pretty. This Bessie Love.
Yeah,
Um,
she was a great. I was just reading up on her, and I was reading her through her filmography, and it was like, okay, she was in the Goldwyn Follies or whatever. But one film of hers struck out at me, and you guys have probably seen it before. If you're at all interested in weird, batshit insane stuff, she was in the Douglas Fairbanks film,
Oh, the
which is
mystery of the leaping fish.
The Mystery of the Leaping Fish, yes,
Yeah.
where Douglas Fairbanks, the swashbuckling thief of Baghdad, Zorro Douglas Fairbanks, plays a coke-addled detective called Coke Any Day,
Coke any day,
and
yeah.
it's basically like
oh,
a spoof on Sherlock Holmes.
Have you
hmm
not seen that, Nick? I would have sworn you would have
No.
seen that. Oh, it's directed by Todd Browning as well.
What?
Yeah,
Freaks?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Wow, that's how did that get off my radar? Yes, thank you both.
She's also no, just now she's in the 1925 version of The Lost World as well.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right.
So she is
Oh,
stunning,
she's the
actually.
star of The Lost World, actually. If the IMDb, I haven't seen The Lost World in a long time, but
But anyway,
and
she is. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, years later. before her death. She's also in The Hunger, the
With the Tony
David
Scott
Bowie
vampire,
vampire.
no,
Yeah,
yeah, vampire movie.
yeah. It's her
Wow,
final credit.
wow.
And she's
Um,
also, I guess, somewhere in the James Bond movie on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah,
okay,
she's
so she had a
in
long
Jose
career.
Ramon Larraz's Vampires. Wow, she's got
Whoa,
some pretty interesting credits. Yeah,
that's yeah, cool. Anyway, cool girl. And she is very so at this point she's like 17 or 18 in this movie, right? And she does in that way is a somewhat age inappropriate for our lead, right? Because William S. Hart's 50 something at this
pays
point.
you.
So yeah, but she is quite
Just wait till we get to Tumbleweeds, and then we'll see what you have to say then, Nick.
okay, but she is very beautiful in a very ethereal kind of she looks like a Dante Gabriel Rossetti painting or something like that. She's
Yeah.
just quite she's quite stunning and they film her very effectively to kind of give her that kind of
This'll
wistful
get your
look.
juices flowing, Nick. In The Mystery of the Leaping Fish as well, her character name is the Little Fish Blower. So make of that what you will.
All right. Anyway, so when she shows up with this wagon train full of pioneers who've gotten lost out in the desert somewhere, and it's all very kind of it is very biblical looking. Like it's that kind of the landscape. I wish this was a better print because I think this film might be really beautiful, just based on what we've got. But this wagon train comes through. Everyone's dying of thirst and starvation. As Gino said, they show up. William S. Hart is less than sympathetic because basically he's turned his back on uh, Caucasian civilization, right? He's been ripped off. He's like, I'm done with society. I'm going to live out here and be a bandit with my Mexican buddies. Um, so where the film gets problematic, I think, is in this idea that the way to turn him back is that she appeals to his whiteness. She appeals to his Caucasianness, right? She says, now we don't see this though in this version. In this
Right.
version, it's implied maybe, but it's never a direct thing of like, how can you do this? You're a white man. You should, we don't get that. So
No.
in that way,
And just to get ahead of this,
hmm,
because I know Nick's not, because people who don't know Nick necessarily, when you, yeah, who are complaining about this film online, that really does sound like special pleading along the lines of, Elon Musk saying that he was just throwing out, what was he saying? Love, signs
whatever.
of
Yeah.
love or something or
Oh,
whatever
he
the
was
phrase
sending his
is.
heart out. He was sending his heart
Yeah,
out to
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Yes.
So yes, it's but yes, we can't properly criticize it along these lines because we haven't seen it. But
But it may well be the
assuming
case.
it
I
is
don't.
in
I
there,
mean,
yeah.
certainly it
But
seems. I mean,
but it
if you
could
read
be
between the
more
lines,
nuanced than that, couldn't it? So the
potentially
outrage is definitely putting the horse ahead of the cart there,
a
right?
little. I think a little
Yeah.
bit, and I do think that the ending is that's like I read a review of the film where they basically said, oh yeah, he comes back and he massacres all of his Mexican brothers. I don't think he does. Is doesn't he just go to them and say, look, if you agree to leave the pioneers alone, I'll let you have all the money we've been stealing. And they think it over and they go, all right. Like am I not wrong? Is that not how he works it out with his
It's
gang?
the alternative version where he has a metal hand at the end, maybe. Uh,
Yeah, no, that's the Great Silence, Clive.
oh,
That's
sorry. Yeah.
a
Okay, I
different
was
movie
getting
entirely.
confused.
Anyway, so yeah, as I said, it's a bit difficult to kind of to figure out what to think. I would definitely have major issues with the film if it included the stuff that apparently maybe it's supposed to include, but I didn't see that version. I only saw this version, which doesn't have such a direct kind of yeah, potentially white supremacist kind of attitude. Because I don't like the idea of exceptionalism, right? I never have the idea that any one group is more moral or more whatever than any certainly like ethnically or racially or whatever. Like it's a deeply problematic idea. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Clive, what do you think?
Well, both of these films, the shame about both of them in a way is they both strike me as potentially quite fascinating, maybe not quite raising to the heights of Hell's Hinges, maybe, but they both have the potential of being really interesting films, and they're so bowdlerized and compromised that I mean, it is almost impossible to review them really. In the case of the Aryan, though, and to your point, yes, because you are dealing with such potentially problematic material, you do need the whole thing, and you do just in case. Because my guess is that thus far we haven't really encountered anything like this in the Thomas Hart filmography. That
William S.
some
Hart.
people.
William S. Hart. Who's
Sorry,
Thomas?
what did I call him?
Thomas Hart.
Thomas Hart.
Oh yes, yeah, that's another podcast I do with some other folks.
Okay.
But yeah. So anyway, yeah, Brian Hart so far. There are certain things that I find a bit more difficult getting bored with, and it's sometimes to do with religiosity, for example. But I don't think we've even had any glimmers, surprisingly, actually, because even films that are otherwise, unproblematic of this era do have issues of race, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've come across anything dodgy in William S. Hart's
Not
filmography
really.
thus far.
There's,
So I would
there's a
say
there's a
I would be
comedy there's a comedy Chinese character, but he's not treated in a particularly offensive way or whatever
right.
in one of them, and that's
Yeah.
about it.
So it would surprise me if suddenly William S. Hart, got on his soapbox, just out of the blue for this film. That would surprise me. So I'm guessing, yeah, the nuance of the film is probably just, well, we don't know. We don't know if it's there or not. But I would wager it probably is, and it's nowhere near as offensive as people are assuming it is online.
Yeah, because when people are pairing it with, and it is paired with Birth of a Nation, right? Like in some of
Which
the
is just
reviews.
a lazy comparison anyway, because that's just the most high-profile film that people know of that era with race issues in it. But the race
Right.
issues would be totally different anyway. This got nothing to do with Mexicans in it. So it's a
Sure.
it's a poor comparison by people who don't know their film history anyway.
Right, but
Right.
as I said, it's being thrown out there in part because apparently William S. Hart did want to cast I don't remember her name, but the actress who throws herself off a cliff in she was supposed to play the part that went to Bessie Love. Bessie was a later, so there was anyway.
Yeah,
That's
which
not
is they were actresses working at the time.
yes,
I mean, there's
neither
no
that's not
real
yes.
connection there at all. No.
So
And you did
yeah,
say, one of you did say earlier that William S. Hart didn't like his role in this film and didn't like what he had to do in this film. So, if anybody's to blame for this, I mean, as much as a brilliant writer as he was of films, I mean, of course, he wrote the last film that we reviewed, which was Hell's Hinges, which brilliant film. But I think you have to lay this more at the doorstep of C. Gardner Sullivan than William S. Hart, honestly,
that seems fair.
because, people like to lay things at the doorstep of the star who made the film. And, it doesn't help that William S. Hart gets directorial credit, but he's not really writing these films. He's not constructing the story. He's constructing ideas surrounding the story, probably. He's probably in the writer's room, coming up with stuff. But it's not story and screenplay by C. Gardner Sullivan and William S. Hart. It's purely C. Gardner Sullivan's psychology at play here. Maybe he had an axe to grind with certain minority groups, but I don't think, in the defense of William S. Hart, I don't think that this was necessarily his idea of a film that he wanted to do. And as you stated before, was quite uncomfortable making it.
Well, just to push back against that a little bit, though, and again, I'm not claiming that this film necessarily does have it. It might have. I'm just saying that we don't know from what we've got, right? So it's a bit rich to get all outraged about. But just to push back against that a little bit, if it is the case, I would argue that whereas everything you said is correct, at this point, William S. Hart, I think, was big enough of a name that he chose his projects, right? I would say. I don't think he's a director, he's an actor for hire necessarily. So I think we can, if there is anything to blame the film for, I think we can lay some of the blame at his feet, because I'm pretty sure he was a man who chose the projects he wanted to make, and he could have turned it down. But again,
Interestingly,
that's only assuming if there is anything to be, overly offended by in the first place.
so it's interesting. Apparently, one of his issues was he felt in the original version of the script there wasn't enough of a reason given for why this character had gone so bad, I guess, right? And I'm wondering if actually the addition of his mother dying was like at the request of William S. Hart, because he was like I can't play this character if you don't give me like a better reason. It can't just be that my money gets taken away, because then I'm a total asshole, basically, if that's the case. So apparently he asked Gardner to give him better motivation for turning his back on, yeah.
Is there any indication at all that in the original version, because there's nothing in this version, is there any indication at all that the character is maybe supposed to be mixed race at all? Because that would also make a little bit more sense, right? That he kind of decides to side with the one part of it but it seems to be like he's just a total well, as the title is, he's the Aryan, right? And then because he's swindled by other white people,
Right.
decides to yeah,
It
it is a very
defects. Excuse me.
yeah, so it's a very I'm wondering if we're missing some important part of the puzzle, because it seems like a very odd setup from the get-go.
I mean, my feeling is if you took away this whole question of how he's motivated to kind of, I mean, because it is again, it's still the love of a beautiful young Christian lady. We've seen this before, right? It's a kind of a William S. Hart staple at this point. But this idea of appealing to him on a racial basis, if that wasn't in the film, I don't really see what the problem with this kind of is. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, but that's like saying, if Hitler didn't kill 6 million Jews, what a fine politician he was. I mean, it is part and parcel of the story. So if it is, but again, I'm saying it's not necessarily is problematic because we're missing the nuance. But if it is, if it is a racist film, then we should just put our hands in the air and say it's a racist film and no special pleading needed. But the thing is, we don't know. We just don't know. But kind of that roundabout, well, if it's like no,
no, I
like,
see.
yeah,
Yes,
you
I
see what I
get it.
mean?
No, I get it, and I get yes, yeah. It's really hard. It's just really hard to. It's too bad because in a way, I think if it wasn't called the Aryan I
Yes,
mean, the title is an issue for sure.
yes.
If it had a different title and if that stuff wasn't there, as I said, I think it would be a
Well,
cracking
so
little
this is the
revenge
thing.
western,
This
right?
is the thing, isn't it? Like, if this was a film starring someone you didn't know and it came out of, Burning Cross Studios, Alabama, or something like that,
Yes,
then you
I
would,
would not have questions. I would
yeah,
know
exactly.
exactly where we were.
But
Yes.
suddenly, for William S. Hart to make a film like this with that title and that setup, I find it hard to believe that there isn't something more going on in the full length. That's what my gut tells me is they tackled the subject matter because they had something to say about it that wasn't problematic. Now, I could be wrong about that, but my gut tells me that's not the case. Unfortunately, for the time being, we don't know. I mean,
Or
what do
fortunately
you
for
reckon,
me,
Gino, about some of these issues?
Well, for me, the way when I was viewing, at least again, we need to really emphasize that with this particular version, a lot, I think it's fair to say that if those elements did exist within the film originally in its original release, then yes, of course, condemn that. Unless it was being used like let's say like how Johnny Spite or Norman Lear used, the characters of Alf Garnett and Archie Bunker respectively to present,
right?
this bigoted horrendous view of the world on purpose to lay the backdrop of, yeah, maybe this is a shitty position to take, and yeah, maybe we shouldn't be thinking this after all.
That's brilliant, by the way, Gino. I think this is the first time in the history of the internet William S. Hart's being compared to Alf Garnett. I love it.
But it's unfair to review. I think, I mean, even though this is a completionist William S. Hart podcast where we're reviewing as many films of his as we can and as many films of his as we can get our hands on, you're right. It is a little unfair to review a film which is likely missing much of its intended footage. I mean, if there are things like that in the film, of course, they do need to be addressed, and problematic elements in films like that of this era do need to be addressed and handled, I think, with kid gloves. But for me, with this particular version, it just seems as if the whole whiteness and remember your whiteness and turn against these savage Mexican, quote unquote, is kind of shoehorned in, like at the end, really. Like it nowhere is, I mean, yes, I mean, he joins like a Mexican bandito gang, but his dissension is kind of last minute, where it feels like it was shoehorned into the plot to sort of make a statement, at least in this particular version. I mean, if the full-length American release has these elements proliferated throughout the story, then yes, I could see the arousal of outrage. But
Right.
again, with this particular version, it just seems as if, that's something that's just, oh, by the way, let's turn against these Mexicans at the end of at like the 5 minutes left in this film.
That's what make it seems a bit suspicious. I'm wondering if there's anything missing in terms of
well, I have
learn why these Mexicans, why they have a grudge against this white community, for example. There might be something like that,
Well, now that I have Diane Kaiser-Kozarski's book, The Complete Films of William S. Hart, a pictorial record, right here with me, and I'm just going to read the synopsis and and some of the reviews so that maybe we could get a little picture here. Here's what the synopsis that was given in the Moving Picture World of April 29th, 1916. Steve Denton rides into Yellow Ridge with a money belt filled after years of toil in the mines beyond the desert. The local gamblers covet the fortune, but fail to get Steve to try the roulette table until the enticer, Trixie, comes to exercise her charms on him. He blindly follows her lead and is watching the wheel with stern stare when a telegram is received. He asks the woman to read it. She lies when she says it contains good news, for it tells of the critical illness of his mother. In the morning, Steve awakes to find his belt is empty. In his feverish search through his pockets, he comes upon the telegram. As the truth dawns, he goes to the telegraph office to send the wire home. The operator hands him the news that his mother has died. Wild with rage, he shoots up the town and drives away with Trixie lying limp over his horse before him. His heart is now filled with hate for all women, and Trixie becomes his slave in a community where he tolerates only the scum of the section. Across the desert comes a pack train of Mississippi farmers who have left their fertile valleys to hunt for gold. Their water is all but gone, and their stock is fagged. Their leaders plead with Steve for aid, but the white race may expect nothing from him. Back to the wailing women and children go to the despondent leaders. Mary Jane, a waif among them, is not cowed by the story they tell. She goes at night to repeat their pleas to the harsh white man. He looks upon her as another victim to share Trixie's lot, but her innocent and fearless attitude toward him makes him hesitate. Meanwhile, his men have carried off the women of the train. As the farmers pursue and there's bloodshed in the air, Steve yields to the little girl. He trades the safety of those people for his rich mine, leaves his wealth to his followers, and guides the strangers out of the desert. And let me just read some of the reviews here. Mr. Hart is a powerful figure in all of his pictures. He commands attention and carries conviction. It seems to me, however, that he has been allowed to overdo things a little too often in this, with a result that tension drops and the situations lose much of their strength. That was a review from WIDS of March 30th, 1916. And Variety, in their review of March 24th, 1916, says, C. Gardner Sullivan is to be congratulated on having written a screenplay that fits William S. Hart, the star of the cast, like a glove. Of course, all Hart plays are somewhat similar, and in the majority, it is more Hart than story. But in this case, the two seem to have been very happily blended by the author, and the result is a very likable five-reel production. So even that's kind of presents kind of like a bleak view of this film. Again, we will likely never know if this was intended to be William S. Hart's version of a Birth of a Nation-esque film. But from you guys did a little digging. In anything you read, was there like any protests from Mexicans or anything that followed this film?
So what's interesting is no, I don't think so. I mean, they do. I read a lengthy review at Letterboxd where the person had some strong opinions about, what we assume if the film in its original form has these much more direct calls to a kind of like white solidarity against, ethnic whatever. Then yeah, the person was like, yeah, well, this is very, very deeply troubling and problematic. They said, however, at the time, no, there doesn't appear to have been. It also says that unlike the race riots and revival of the Ku Klux Klan and all of the calls of censorship that were spearheaded by the NAACP in response to Birth of a Nation, Hart was apparently particularly popular with black audiences. Now I realize that this is not a Mexican, like we're not, but apparently he was. And in fact, I just noticed that the William S. Hart Museum closed in solidarity with Black Lives Matter at some point in 2020. So clearly, the museum obviously sees Hart's legacy as not being one of racial divisiveness. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know. Still not wanting to split hairs. Those are totally different.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. And then, so that one of the questions is maybe this is the way to kind of parse it a little bit is why is the Argentinian version missing this stuff? If it is it because it was there and an Argentinian audience and an Argentinian distributor was like, yeah, no, that's not going to fly here.
I don't think that makes sense because then that would mean, shall we release this entirely incomprehensible film in that case, or just not at all? I think it is just an issue of
Well, I mean,
properly.
but you can simply cut the intertitles or change them so that they're not so directly, racially loaded, right? Because I mean, with a silent film, there isn't
No, I
the
understand that,
only
but
exists in right.
but but you seem to be connecting the two things that this version is shortened with and those two things don't match up, right?
But my understanding though is that this version, like they did make changes. For example, like that the intertitle cards are fundamentally different. That's the argument that I'm seeing online is that they rewrote those titles so that there wasn't that direct call to his
Is that
Caucasian.
true?
That's what people are saying. I don't know,
Who are
but
these
that's what they
people saying
said.
this? I don't know. I mean, if it was written by a film historian or someone, I would buy it. I don't know if I'm buying random people on Letterboxd.
Yeah,
Okay.
someone with a more legitimate background, certainly. Yeah, I mean, it's a troubling film to discuss in any regard, really, if you think about it. Given the racial elements that even still exist within this particular version of the film. But you're right, just as a baseline here, it's very difficult to discuss a film that is likely missing much of its intended footage, and the extra content that may or may not have been excised. It's an interesting I actually think that this film is more interesting to discuss than it is to watch.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And takes longer as well, apparently.
Yes, yeah, probably. Okay, so here's one more thing. Okay, so I think a lot of this actually comes from, so this letterboxed person is responding to a book that I actually found online up on Internet Archive, which is called Shooting Cowboys and Indians, Silent Western Films, American Culture, and the Birth of Hollywood by Andrew Brody Smith. And in this book, wherever this author has gotten his information, he has listed some stuff that's like, so I don't know if he had access to a print that we don't have access to, right? But these are
Or
where these
maybe the original censorship cards,
right.
maybe.
Yeah, so these are, where things like so this person's talking about the version we watched because that's the version that they watched. So they're saying the title is even changed to La Fiera Domada, The Taming of the Beast. But there's also no sign of such intertitles as Smith describes. And then here we have an example intertitle. The girl accuses him of not being a white man, for if he were, he would never allow. And I don't even want to read the next part because it's really racist. But some racist terms for Mexican people and indigenous people to rape the women of European origin. So if that's true, then this this person who wrote this book, Shooting Cowboys, is saying that like there were direct racial slurs in the intertitle cards.
Well, yeah, again, there could definitely be, but I'm just wondering in service of what? In service of simply being racist, which is entirely possible. It's just a racist film. Or again, is clearly the character is racist. Is the film racist?
But this is the thing.
That's what.
But what's disturbing is it's Bessie who's saying this. It's our pretty young blonde white girl who's using these racist terms to describe the Mexican
Right. But
group
again,
and
and again,
appealing.
I'm not wishing to kind of try and excuse if that's the case, that's the case. But again, it's still we don't know in what
This is
context she's using it.
this is
Like,
the issue because
yeah,
in this book, because I read the section, right, in this book, and where this is where a lot of these connections are being made to Birth of a Nation and so on. But I think there are details that are wrong in his plot synopsis, unless again there's like literally different footage from the end of the film as well, where there is actually like I'm not wrong, right? There isn't actually a scene where he kills a bunch of his own Mexican
no,
followers, right? That's not in the film, yet
no.
it's alluded to in this. So I'm wondering if we can fully trust Mr.
Yeah.
Brody's book.
Maybe there's
I
another.
mean, I just
Yeah.
read you the whole plot synopsis as it's presented in a book about William S. Hart, written
Mhm.
by probably one of his biggest uh, researchers. And this review comes direct from a trade paper at the time, the Moving Picture World. And I have no reason to believe that they would purposefully excise plot elements from
Yes.
their synopsis for any reason.
Right.
I mean, why would they have? Why would I mean back then they had no obligation to quote unquote wokeness to sort of eliminate, certain words from the text.
Right.
So I mean, I would like to tend to believe that Hart was more of a progressive guy than than he's being made out to be in association with this film. I
Mhm.
really would, but again, it's up for conjecture. I mean, the thing is William S. Hart never really made a film like this again with such pointed. I mean, there are racial elements that do over the course of his filmography do bubble to the surface a little bit, but never anything as pointed as this. I mean,
Right.
it could be a case of a this is a case of somebody, and you said it yourself, he was uncomfortable with his character in this. This may be a case of, yeah, maybe this movie wasn't such the great idea that I thought it was, and yeah, maybe I did upset some people with it. Yeah, not going to do that again.
Hmm.
Ironically, as well, in our next film, equally as problematic that he sides with European settlers to the south of the Americas. But we'll get to that in a minute. And there we go. I don't suppose we're going to find any closure on this anytime soon. And we haven't even discussed the Antarctic cut with penguins, which
It is
apparently is
true.
very problematic. So let's go from one film where we can't properly talk about to another
Yes.
and get us into even more trouble.
Yeah, yes, yeah. And again, another film where apparently if we watch the full version, in some ways it's probably more problematic than this reduced version we have, because the full version is kind of a white savior narrative, is my understanding, that William S. Hart actually plays a Spanish child who's washed up on a beach or something like that, and adopted by an indigenous tribe who worships him as a god, which is,
He's making up for insulting the Mexicans in the last film.
But apparently, if you watch this film, Rival Tribes, right, this version, none of that's in this film, so it appears, for all intents and purposes, that he's actually supposed to be an indigenous tribe member of, I can't remember if it's Aztec or whatever, but anyway.
He's
Taiwan?
Mayan. He's Mayan.
Mayan. Oh, okay, yes. But then isn't there a weird thing, like, don't they not exist at the same time at all in history? Like the Mayan and Aztec cultures are separated by thousands of years.
Yep. So, that's right. Yeah.
But apparently that's not we're dealing with a version where the names have been changed. Apparently the original tribe was the Tehuan tribe.
Which would make more sense. Otherwise it's about as likely as Raquel Welch fighting dinosaurs, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Precisely. Anyway, Gino, why don't you give us a plot synopsis as best you can? If you know more about the full version, feel free to give that as well, and then we'll get into this.
Okay. I'm just going to read directly from Diane's book here. The next film that we're going to be discussing is The Captive God, which was released July 23rd, 1916, and as Nick said earlier, is also known as Rival Tribes. This film was preceded by two films that we did not have access to review, and those films were The Primal Lore and The Apostle of Vengeance. So this was produced by the Triangle Film Corporation under the supervision of Thomas H. Ince. It was distributed by Triangle and, as I said earlier, released July 23rd, 1916. The production cost was $50,000. Now, that's per press release. The figures could have inflated or deflated depending on your source. But I put that into my inflation calculator, and $50,000, the making of this film, would be equal to, in 2025 dollars, $1,607,920.79. This was directed by Charles Swickard, with a story and screenplay by Monty M. Catterjohn, photographed by Clyde Divina, and the art director was M. Donner. And the cast consists of Chiappa, played by William S. Hart, Lolomi, played by Eden Markey, Tecolote, played by Dorothy Dalton, Montezuma, played by Robert McKim, Mexitli, played by P.D. Tabler, Maya, played by Dorcas Matthews, Bikama, played by Herbert Fairjohn, and Tuyos, played by Robert Fortman. And the synopsis, as described in the Diane Kaiser-Kozarski book, says this: the picture tells the story of a little Spanish boy who was cast upon the shore of the east coast of Mexico early in the 16th century, when Mexico was dominated by the Aztec Indians. Never having seen a white person before, the local natives, a tribe called the Tehuans, bring him up as a god and call him Chiappa. When he reaches manhood, Chiappa is given authority over his entire tribe. He falls in love with the priestess Tecolote, and she yields to his advances, although she is quite unworthy of him and encourages other suitors. Then the Aztecs hear that under the white god, the Tehuans are very prosperous and start forth to conquer them. The Aztec army is under command of Mexitli, the chief general of Montezuma, the emperor, and having conquered the Tehuans, carries off Tecolote as his personal slave. Chiappa follows as a spy. In the Garden of Montezuma, he is wounded by a guard, but Lolomi, the beautiful daughter of the emperor, saves him. They fall in love. Meanwhile, Mixitli is tired of Tecolote and now seeks the hand of the princess Lolomi, who would rather die than have him. As the emperor gives Mixitli his consent, he tries to get the princess by force, and in doing so, discovers Chiappa. Chiappa is sentenced to die at the end of the year on the sacrificial stone, but Lolomi, finding her pleased to her father of no avail, sends word to the Tehumans that their god is captive. An avenging army sweeps down, and there is brought about a sequence of thrilling scenes with a smashing finish. And that was the plot synopsis as described in the moving picture world of July 29th, 1916. And in the reviews section, again, I'll just read the reviews here. Weeks of painstaking research were required merely to establish the accuracy of detail, and the big and sculpture department spent not weeks but months in copying old Aztec carving and figures to make exact scale copies of Aztec temples and tombs required. This plate affords every triangle exhibitor unlimited opportunity for effective lobby display, promotion, press work. It will not be hard to obtain a figure of an Indian god. Anything of the ugly prehistoric type will do, and it will be a big hit in the lobby, says Triangle of July 8th, 1916. It is not the story, but the staging and marvelous accuracy in settings that ranks this far above the average photoplay. Whole villages and even a city with its royal palace was constructed to give the proper atmosphere. The capital city of the Aztecs realistically brings us that which we had only heretofore been able to read about in history books. Several battles are fought in the neighborhood of the city and the village, and for realism, they have seldom been excelled, said the New York Dramatic Mirror clipping of 1916. And lastly, the story is one of the type that has long held sway in the popular fiction magazines. It is at once thrilling and carries an air of mystic romance that is compelling. The picture abounds with action, and some of the battle scenes are most effective. The feature is one of the best the Triangle has released in some time, said quote unquote Fred of Variety, July 7th, 1916.
All righty. Yeah, but we did not watch the 50-minute version of this. We watched the somewhere between 9 and 11-minute version, which yeah. So yeah, they've cut.
Which I had to pay for, by the way. I had to pay for a download link from Harpodian in order to just get this shortened version of it, where yet again the characters are renamed and the whole like tribes are renamed and like instead of the Aztecs, it's the Mayans, as you said before, Nick. And I just gotta wonder, Nick. I mean, given your pedigree as a teacher, this must have just driven you insane.
Yeah, well, yeah, as you said, the knowing that those two tribes existed thousands and thousands of years apart, and also some terrible, like Lolomi becomes Princess Taki, like that's awful.
Yeah.
Then there's somebody called Casio, which immediately makes me think of like home organs or watches.
You leave
Yeah.
your home organ out of this, Neil.
All right. Yeah, so as I said, we really only watch the section of the film that deals with William S. Hart's Chiappa character, basically, breaking into the garden, meeting Princess Olomi, falling in love with her, and then being captured. He's going to be sacrificed, and then he's rescued by his entire tribe, who kind of sweeps down. I watched this twice. For some reason, the first time I watched it, it just did not penetrate my brain at all. I watched it, and then minutes later, I had forgotten everything that I'd seen. I was like, that was weird. So I came back to it the following night, and I rewatched it, and I played the soundtrack to another movie starring a Caucasian actor playing an indigenous person. I played the soundtrack to Navajo Joe, which is by Ennio Morricone, a film that stars Burt Reynolds playing a Navajo, made in Italy. And for some reason, it totally elevated the film for me, and I was able to completely follow
Well,
what
that's
was
a
going
great
on.
piece of music.
Well, it is an amazing soundtrack, and it really, for some reason, suits the atmosphere, even though, again, it's not traditional It's not actually indigenous music. It's made by an Italian, but it's really good. So if you with the version we watched has no soundtrack at all, so that's why I felt
Oh,
comfortable.
really? The when I watched Rival Tribes earlier, it had a piano type soundtrack.
Weird. Did I just have my sound down? This is how
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
tired
that's the
I am,
version I
guys.
watched as well, which was 14 minutes, not 9 and to 11. So,
But this is the one that, yeah, maybe I just, that's weird. Maybe I just had my sound off, something like that. That's really strange. Anyway, I apologize. It does apparently have, the version we watched does apparently have a piano soundtrack. I still recommend Ennio Morricone's rousing score to Navajo Joe.
Navajo Joe, Navajo Joe, that one.
It's a hell of a piece of music. Um, but yes, anyway. Yeah, so this version really, as I said, it jettisons. We don't see any of the stuff with him being Spanish. We don't see any of the stuff with him being found and raised and made a captive, well, being made a god, and then. Um, but what we do see is some pretty decent costumes, some pretty amazing sets, I think, for the time. I think all the like the big statuary and stuff, and the kind of the ziggurats they built somewhere apparently in is it San Diego or somewhere like that. That this was, I think I read that anyway. Um, yeah, it looks kind of amazing. I don't disagree with the contemporary reviewers who said probably at the time this was as close to seeing like a history book come to life as was possible. Um, and here's another takeaway for me. I was thinking, okay, so like we've seen William S. Hart as the kind of prototype, this Rosetta Stone for the badass action hero, right? For what Clint Eastwood would go on, what Jason Statham, all of these, the hard ass, you know, um, action hero. But I'd never thought of him as being a pioneer in the kind of sword and sandal genre until I watched this. And there was elements of this
Yeah.
that almost made me think of like Milius's Conan the Barbarian. There's scenes of him in his loincloth wrestling with a dude with a knife, or some I don't know, some of that stuff really made me think of like the Mummy and like all of those kind of like historical action. I mean the Brendan Fraser Mummy, not the
But
not
the other thing as well is unavoidable to compare it to is Mel Gibson's Apocalypto.
right. Yes, yeah, which actually I've never seen, so I have no idea if that's an accurate. Is that a fair comparison,
Well,
Clive?
there's definitely yeah, there's definitely, you know, parallels and shared kind of concerns and ideas and backdrops and
And
yeah.
as we know, there's no problems with racism with Mel Gibson.
No,
So
absolutely. Squeaky
once
clean.
again, we're off the hook, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's bring Mel
Huh.
Gibson in as a mediator to solve everything.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
But no, but above all else, even more so than the Aryan, this is such a compromised viewing experience. I don't know. Yes, like you said, Nick, judging from what we do have, the production
But
design is pretty impressive.
And so is the scale of the battles. Like there's like
Yeah.
tons of people running down, and yeah, I think they're well choreographed, well staged. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it might be a really yeah. I don't know. I kind of would love to see the rest of this. Actually, I have to say because we've got a
well, I'm glad you brought that up because there is, unlike the Aryan, the full-length version of this does exist, but it's
Oh.
locked up in a film archive somewhere.
right.
Ah.
Joys. So yeah, another reason why I started this podcast is so that, we could spread awareness of the filmography of William S. Hart, who is a character in film history that, well, everybody talks about Harold Lloyd to death. Everybody talks about Chaplin to death. And mind you, they're genius filmmakers, but I think that the conversation has shifted to discussing figures that aren't associated with. I mean, in our last episode, we James L. Nybar, he flat out said that the Western was integral to the development of the motion picture, and one of those stars was William S. Hart. And I think that without discussing him as a major player in film history is rather dismissive, and I think outright ignorant. And so that's why we started this podcast so that we could spread awareness of this sadly forgotten figure in film history that has fallen by the wayside, even though he has a whole high school, even though he has a whole school district named after him and a museum named after dedicated to him and grounds and everything, he still isn't as on the tongue as, say, Chaplin is, or Douglas Fairbanks, or Buster Keaton, or Harold Lloyd. And I'm hoping that this podcast changes that.
I think for whatever reason, I think it might be that intersection between, I mean, the silent film in the wider world of film fandom is, unfortunately quite niche. The stuff that seems to have spread the most are the comedies. For whatever reason, comedy seems to
Yes.
cross those boundary lines. And also over the years, yeah, like you said, Douglas Fairbanks, the swashbuckling stuff, and some horror classics. But I think there's something about that that's particularly hard to take for some reason for some people, is if it's silent and if it's a Western, that's like a double mark against it or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't have the crossover appeal of yeah, clearly silent comedies are the ones that people can get on with for whatever reason, above and beyond any other genre of the silent era.
Yeah, I mean, most of my friends, who are film historians and everything, if they discuss the silent era at all, it's going to be like a silent comedy, like my friend Thomas Reeder, who's written numerous books on silent comedies and very obscure silent comedies, and my friend Rob Farr, who's coming out with a book on Mr. and Mrs. Sidney Drew, which I hope people support, Split Reel, my friend Rob Stone. And, to me, I think it's ignorant to just flat out disregard the Western and the actors who appeared in those films. I mean, William S. Hart was just as popular as Charlie Chaplin was at that time.
Right.
Context is important here. But it's just sad, and this brings up a whole broader conversation. I mean, we got to get back to the captive God and discussing that. But this brings up a whole broader conversation where the Western film, though integral to the development of the motion picture, has been marginalized so severely over the years, and especially in this day and age, that it's almost been written out of the history books, with the exception of important milestones as The Great Train Robbery, arguably the first narrative film. Other than that, silent westerns are rarely ever discussed, unless it's like James Cruise's The Covered Wagon or something, or something that Douglas Fairbanks, or one of the popular silent figures who's popular with the cool kids now, has done. If it's a Tom Mix, if it's a William S. Hart, I think nobody talks about it.
I think to dwell on it
pisses me off because William S. Hart is just as important to film history as Charlie Chaplin was.
I think to dwell on it a little bit as to why it might be, and to try and play devil's advocate. I think if I were to guess, the reason is I think people look to, let's take an American-centric version to begin with, right? So let's say the majority of people exist on a diet of new English language American films, probably quite Hollywoodized. To be interested in other things, I think they have to offer things that those movies don't provide and also excel at. So, for example, people who are really into really good action cinema will gravitate to films from Hong Kong from 70s, 80s, 90s, just because the action is just so much better or something. And then in terms of when you're looking at silent comedies, especially with the slapstick stuff, people just don't do that at all anymore. And they certainly don't excel, like in the way, like some of the shit that Buster Keaton does in his films. Like, they're still trying to figure out how he did it. Like, how on earth did he manage to do that and not die several times over? Right? It's kind of remarkable. And I think Westerns, you could argue Westerns improved when color was added, when sound was added. So even though you have fine silent westerns, they don't necessarily deliver something that later westerns don't have. Do you know what I mean? So therefore, there's no great rush to seek out silent westerns above and beyond post, stagecoach westerns or stuff. That would be my guess, is that they don't
But
front and
I
center
think,
offer something that isn't, that is remarkably different then.
yeah, but here's the thing. The people who, I mean, I could see that argument, Clive,
Mm.
but people, I'm not saying you, but I'm saying that people who share that viewpoint are rather ignorant because you wouldn't
Yeah,
have your
yeah. I'm just
stagecoaches,
playing
you
devil's
wouldn't
advocate
have
here.
your Italian spaghetti westerns without guys like William S. Hart paving the way for that. So I think if you ignore what came before, then what came after, you don't have the proper context of how we got here.
Oh no, absolutely. But again, I think that's a thing for film historians and people who are really interested. I think for your average punter, the fact that that stuff does exist now, they don't necessarily need to know how it got to be that way. They can just take the modern version and they don't need to know the etymology, for want of a better word, behind it. Do you know what I mean? For your regular.
Well, first of all, Clive, I'm going to say you meant etymology because you just talked about the study of insects.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
That's what you meant.
Yeah, I was talking about the spider web like
Ah,
history of cinema.
ah,
Yeah.
I see.
You
So
know, Clive,
I'll
Nick's
throw
friends.
I'll throw my 2 cents in here as well. So as always, I like to agree with everyone. So I'm going to agree with you both. I'm going to start by agreeing with Gino, and I'm going to go one step further,
Well,
Gino.
before you say that, I'm not
Hang on.
I'm not
I know
forwarding
you're playing
that
devil's advocate
opinion.
anyway. So
I'm
I'm
just
going,
saying that that's why, maybe for
right,
some people. It's not
right.
my opinion.
No, I understand. And so I think that even going beyond what you said, Gino, not only do you need to see William S. Hart to understand where the Western goes, but you also need to see him to understand where action cinema goes, because I think that these early silent Westerns are foundational to all action cinema, whether it becomes your diehards and the rest of it. The idea of the cool badass with a gun who solves his problems with violence is that this is where that begins.
There would be no Charles Bronson, there would be
Yeah,
no Chuck Norris, there would be no
yeah,
Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee,
yeah,
or Clint Eastwood. There would be none of these people
yeah, it all
without
goes
people
back.
like
Yeah,
William S. Hart. And
agreed.
so that's why
Yep.
he is such an integral figure of film history to study. And
Yeah,
I'm just,
that's why we're doing the show.
yeah,
But
Yeah.
here's what
exactly.
I'll say. I think the Western itself, I think part of the issue is actually the Western itself having fallen out of favor. And that happens post Blazing Saddles,
Mm.
right? Much as I love Mel Brooks, um, that film was a coffin nail for the Western, right? When it came out, apparently within something like 6 months of it coming out, virtually every Western, and at that point in the 70s, still, although there were not as many Westerns in the cinema, they were still coming out theatrically, but there was still a ton of them on TV. Within 6 months or 8 months of that coming out, they were all gone. And so to use an analogy, it would be like if somebody put out like if after the Naked Gun came out, there were no more like police procedurals on TV, right?
Right.
Which is not the case. We still have zillions of police procedurals.
Yeah.
How
We
many?
have a glut of them, if I may be honest,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
go ahead.
we got 29 CSIs and
Yeah.
56 whatever else. So I do think that
It's an
unfortunately,
it's
go
an
ahead.
interesting point, Nick, but I'm also wondering if you might be confusing correlation with causation.
Well, what I'm saying is, well, with regards to
Blazing
that film,
Saddles. Yeah.
no, I don't think so. I think there's a direct A to B relationship between the two. But that said, regardless, for whatever reasons, the Western kind of falls out of favor by the 80s. How many big budget theatrical Westerns have there been in the last 30, 40 years?
And of course, there was the notorious 1981 flop, The Legend of the Lone Ranger, which notoriously flopped and bombed.
Right, pirate
And
movie,
films like that.
another example. Yeah, so like the pirate movie and the Western both have really struggled in the last 30, 40 years to kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Yeah, those
invade.
Pirates of the Caribbean films, they'll never be
Oh,
popular.
okay, they were the exception, obviously, but Cutthroat Island or whatever killed an entire, company, right? Whichever
Right.
one it was. So I do think, unfortunately, because fewer people are watching Westerns at all, then there's going to be less interest in going back and understanding the roots of the Western because people aren't watching Westerns anymore, sadly. I think it's just,
So if I'm to follow along your wavelength, and we need to get back to talking about the captive god, we know
yep,
that.
yep.
But if I'm following your wavelength, then Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles single-handedly killed any interest in the Western going forward and pretty much killed interest in studying the Western going backward.
Yeah,
Possibly. I mean,
I
that's
don't buy
probably a little
that.
harsh. It's probably a little harsh. And as I said, I don't want, I like Mel Gibson. No, I might have said Mel Gibson. I'm not a huge fan of Mel Gibson, though I do like The Road Warrior.
Yeah, I think he was parodying something that was already on its way out.
Sure. Okay, so maybe he was kicking somebody when they were down, kind of a thing.
Well,
All
not
right.
even that. I just think, like I said, I think it's a correlation thing. It was in the air, and it was time to make fun of these
Now,
things.
may I
Plus,
toss it
also
here?
they were like just going because the thing is, you have to, especially in terms of TV westerns. I mean, at a certain point, there were so many TV westerns on television. Like there was nothing but TV
Hmm.
westerns on television, and then you had the spaghetti western boom as well. And so, I can kind of see by that period, people had just basically had their fill of
There was
westerns.
an exhaustion,
Yeah,
Yeah,
possibly.
yeah. It's like when people got sick of musicals in the early 30s when sound came in, and then musicals fell out of fashion, and that sadly killed a lot of people's film careers.
Hmm.
But yeah, very apt, Clive, yes.
and
And
as
you were
well,
going to say,
I
Nick?
think there hasn't been a resurgence necessarily, just because a lot of
Yeah,
again I think the majority of viewers, just regular folks, like a certain a relatability, I think.
yeah,
So something a bit more urban, something, people are gonna, but the West,
relate to.
yeah, the West is just, apart from people who kind of grow up there now, I suppose, but even the West of today is so different that
Right.
I don't know if we'll ever really get that connection to it again, to be honest.
Hmm.
Because it's a disappearing
Well,
world, isn't it?
well, I think we should put a pin in this discussion and
Yeah, yeah.
return to our
Yes.
discussion on the
Yeah,
captive
yeah,
god.
yes,
Sure.
yeah.
When we actually maybe one day know what we're talking about would be good.
I said I liked what I saw of what I saw of it. I enjoyed the 13, 14 minutes we did get to see. As I said, lavish production values for the time.
Yeah, it
Um,
could
uh,
be a really great lost film actually going by the 40 minutes. It's difficult to tell, but
yeah.
the only thing that would let it down would be the storytelling. I think it looks it
Hmm.
would look great. It's got, the only thing is, if the story is rubbish or, as we discussed earlier, a bit
If it's
problematic.
style over substance, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but even then it could work. I mean, some people
Yeah.
like the films of, like Ridley Scott or someone like that, right? And they're a lot often style over substance, right? So that even that doesn't need to necessarily get in its way. But if it was particularly bad in this, or problematic is the other thing, like we dance around a little bit. Because with this one, um, even more so than the Aryan, we yeah, I don't know if this is I don't know how much contentious material was in this or not, you know.
I think the only
Right.
issue is potentially the kind of the white savior narrative, which is, it's not the worst thing in the world. I
No,
mean,
and it's not that
it's
long
done
ago
far,
they
far
stopped
later.
doing it.
I was
Yeah,
going to say, I mean, it was done way beyond this. This is
yeah.
so. I mean, this is such an early film. You can't really beat it up for something that we didn't really become aware of the issues with until like the 1990s. Um, but it also is nice to see Mrs. Mendelbright from the Andy Griffith Show again. That was
Yes.
that was Princess Lolomi, right? Enid Markey back again.
Yes.
Um,
Not Princess Junkie or whatever the fuck she was called. Okay,
Tacky.
yeah, yeah.
Which is the name of
Tacky.
a, now I think about it, is the name of a Mexican chip now, right? Takis?
Takis.
Yeah. So maybe they were ahead of their time with giving her that name.
In this butchered version, this abridged version, yes.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with so the surviving print is that a complete version?
I'm thinking it is. I mean, it's, pardon me, it's been a while since I researched that, but I'm thinking that a complete print of this does survive somewhere. It's just, again, under lock and key in some film vault, has some sort of donor restriction, and nobody wants to touch it for
So
whatever
it's
reason.
so it's not like it's not even in one of those institutions where if you make an appointment and go there, you can view it on the premises.
Yeah, I'm thinking it might be one of those cases. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean,
I found it here.
and look, folks, you know, as much as we love make recording this podcast, and it's very much a passion project of, I believe, all three of us, um, we're not exactly millionaires.
Hmm.
We can't afford to make these pilgrimages to these various film archives to, you know, have a sit down and a viewing. You
Yeah,
know,
tell me
we're
about
not exactly on that level, at
I've been
least as
wanting
of
to
yet.
replace this gold throne of mine for ages, but I just don't have the extra funds.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
So it is, yeah, so there is a full print. It does exist. It is in the hang on, am I reading this right? Could this be possibly? Yes, the George Eastman Museum. So I can
Yes.
only, I can only assume that our hero from such films as
Oh, you're gonna
Anthropologists.
make that
Oh,
connection.
wait, I'm assuming we're talking about a different George Eastman here, yes?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's kept in the anthropophagus room.
Um, yes, anyway, apparently it is in the George Eastman Museum, and apparently they very occasionally pull it out of
Where
mothball, and they
where
just show
is the
this.
George Eastman Museum?
Good question. I do not know.
Oh,
Let's take a look here. Their website is not telling me. Oh, New York, Rochester, New York, 900 East Avenue, Rochester, NY.
that's not a million miles from Connecticut, is it?
No, no, but again,
Are they
I
got
work at FedEx, people.
and
I do make a nice $19 an hour, but I have to buy food.
yes, yeah, and I think
You know what I
like
mean? It's
also
like,
they may not just allow anyone to. I mean, there may be like you have to be
right,
right, like you may have to be an academic or you may need to have
right,
whatever credentials to be allowed to watch it. So yeah,
I wonder. I
exactly.
mean, because some of these places you assume, but then sometimes if you just write them a nice email or a letter, sometimes they go, yeah, sure, come on down. You never know. It's kind of worth it if you are, if you're in going to be going to the New York area for some other reason anytime, it's probably worth just asking. You might be allowed to
Right.
view it.
apparently. Well, it's interesting. One of the websites that I've been frequenting, reading the reviews, like I would think that those people they reference that they have it, but they said they haven't seen it, which makes me think like,
Maybe
yeah,
they haven't digitized it yet, and they surely don't want to be watching that print over and over and over again, right? Because it'll fall to
right,
bits. So
right,
Decomposed, yes,
yeah, so
yeah,
it
yeah.
depends if they've digitized it yet or not,
Hmm.
yes,
or at the very least made some kind of internegative copy or something.
right.
We can only imagine. Hopefully, someday it will see the light
Oh,
of.
I'd really like,
Yeah,
I genuinely would really like to
yeah,
see this in its
I'd love
full.
to come back to it too.
Yeah,
And yeah,
there we go.
And
Maybe
not to
one
get too
day
ahead of
when,
ourselves here, but the next film in his filmography looks kind of fascinating as well, where uh, William S. Hart, I guess, from the film is called The Dawn Maker. And this also, I wish my webcam was working for you guys, because there are some very interesting pictures of William S. Hart where apparently he's playing another indigenous character.
mhm.
So it's a rather interesting, it looks like an interesting film. But I don't think any prints survive of the Dawnmaker at least.
Okay.
But I'll get you some pictures of this when we wrap up here. And speaking of wrapping up, I think it would be a good idea to just like put put a nice bow on this conversation.
Yep.
And just any final thoughts on the Captive God, at least from what we've seen and what we've been able to research about it?
Well, what I was going to say actually, not that, but I was just thinking it might be a good idea when we're done, when we run out of films. We were planning to read a few things as well, right? But I was thinking maybe combined in that final episode, maybe we could do a little rundown summary of all the lost films that we haven't been able to see, and just kind of corral all the photos or synopsis and just talk about anything that jumps out at us of interest.
It's a good idea. Yeah, I like that. Definitely. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So apparently they stretched their budget while making the film by employing participants in the Panama, California exposition in San Diego as extras. That exposition and its Balboa Park location would prove to be a boon to filmmakers throughout the silent era, providing settings from everyone from Fatty Arbuckle, apparently Fatty and Mabel at the San Diego exposition, and Mary Pickford in Rosita.
Are you trying to say exhibition?
What did I say? No, I'm saying exposition, expo. Have you not heard of this before?
Okay. Oh, expo is what you're trying to say, right? Okay.
Yes. But the full term is exposition. Like,
I don't think I actually knew that.
Okay.
I didn't know what expo was short for.
Anyway, yeah. So, I was going to say that actually I'd forgotten to mention that Bob Cortman is in The Captive God, and that man had a hell of a face.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think that's all I wanted to. That was the last thing I wanted to say.
Well, go ahead, Clive.
No. I again, both of these actually would be really interesting to. They both seem to be little puzzle boxes where it would be nice to unlock the final key by seeing the whole things, and then we could say either one where fuck that Aryan, we could say that, or we could say no, you've been wrong, it's great, and
it's been misjudged.
Really interesting as well. So much plenty to think about.
We unpacked a lot with this episode. I mean, Clive was saying to me just off air here that I think that even though we were given very little material to work with, this actually made for, I think, one of our more interesting episodes thus far.
Yeah, because the issues involved are kind of weighty issues, right? So it involves a certain amount of unpacking for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to sign us off here?
Focus out, Gene.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for listening to this episode of Hart to Hart, the William S. Hart podcast. This has been Gino Cuddy, that's been Clive Davis, and that's been Nick Sheehan. You can find our podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, and anywhere where you can find great podcasts such as this. Again, I want to thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Trail Partners. And in the words of William S. Hart, adios amigos, God bless you all, each and every one. Good night.
This has been a Gino Cuddy podcast production.